Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. We have another very special guest. We have Superintendent Goostree from Sentinel Public Schools in Oklahoma, and we're very excited to have Superintendent Goostree with us today. Before we introduce our guest, we do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's giving away hundreds of millions of dollars away to public education in the form of a free gift. So if your district needs unrestricted funds for higher teacher salaries or whatever your district needs, reach out to Ideal Impact. Superintendent Goostree, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, very exciting. So we love our guests that we have on because every guest has a different perspective they bring to public education. Everyone has different experiences. And so for our listeners, could you just share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I was born in Southern Illinois. I grew up in Northwest Kansas. And so we moved down to Oklahoma right before my senior year in high school. I had went to a big high school up in Hays, Kansas, about 1,000 kids. When we moved to Oklahoma, I ended up graduating from a high school that had about 120 kids. So kind of a big culture shock to me, but loved every minute of it. Thought the small school atmosphere was great. And so when I got into coaching and teaching, I wanted to coach and teach in a small school. And so my first job was coaching softball and teaching high school science at a small school in southeastern Oklahoma. And then I came out actually to Sentinel to coach baseball and teach high school, junior high and high school history for 4 years. And then I went back to southeastern Oklahoma, actually back to the same exact school district, Tupelo Public Schools, and was an elementary principal there for 8 years and taught fifth grade math. And then came back to Sentinel 11 or 10 plus years ago. I've been the superintendent here for the last 10 years, going on my 11th year.
Very cool. Wow. That is so interesting. So a lot of the smaller districts and even the larger districts, it's just amazing that you have the ability, superintendents with their leadership skills have the ability to get involved in so many different skill sets, whether it be coaching or teaching or and I guess that's just part of the growth that happens from when you first start to where you eventually become a superintendent. So what are you with everything going on, right? A lot of really exciting things happening in public education. What are you excited about in public education today?
I'm actually excited that there is kind of a renewed focus and maybe even support of public education. I think for the longest time, public education was just kind of there and people kind of took it, not necessarily took it for granted, but it was there and it just kind of did its thing. Here in the last few years, I think with kind of the um, rise of maybe some more private public or excuse me, private education options, kind of that renewed interest in what can we do to help our public education? What can we do to support our public education? I feel like you've got a lot more vocal people now that are out there helping to support public ed. And so I think that's a good thing.
And what do you think caused that shift that and mindset, if you will?
As far as support here lately,
Hmm. Yep.
I think to me, it's been the kind of the more national push for private options. And so I think as it's become more and more um, outspoken for private options, I think the public ed people have had to speak up that much more to make sure that we are not forgotten and that we are supported in ways that we should be.
That's interesting you say that. So we had a podcast guest a few weeks ago, and we it was a similar comment that and it seems like within public education, there's a couple of different ways to look at things. Some districts will look at saying as little as possible out in the public and just kind of watching your words and not saying anything. And then others are just doing the complete opposite. They're really putting themselves out there. And that seems to be helping them. It seems to be helping them being willing to have that conversation and and say what you stand for, say what makes your district great. and what makes your public schools great, right? So, um, is that what you're saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that what you're saying? Is just communicating more and
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty lucky here. Our community has always been very big supporters of our school system. And so we haven't had to try to win back people as far as being supportive of the school. I think it's just more on a kind of a state level. We have more schools, I think, that are trying to collaborate and work together. I think for the longest time, it was kind of a my school's better than your school, and so what can I do to be the best school? And I think now it's a lot more of um, schools calling other schools and saying, "Hey, what are you doing for this? We're having struggles here. How do you guys do this? We want to be better at it." And so it's not so much everybody being on their own island. I think it's much more of schools working together so that we can all get better at what we're doing. I'd say one example of that is out here in Western Oklahoma, just like other rural parts of the of other states, teachers it becomes harder and harder to find teachers all the time. And I know the teacher shortage is not just an Oklahoma thing, but as we become more rural, it becomes more difficult when there's not enough bodies to fill those classrooms. So what we did last year, there's about 20, maybe 20, 22 schools out here. We actually all submitted two different grant applications to try to improve our distance learning capabilities, and not so much so that we can use companies for distance learning, but basically so we can use each other. If I'm not able to find a quality science teacher to fill a spot, um, we're hoping that if we're awarded this grant, we're able to work together and I can get a high quality science education from a neighboring school
wow,
without having to try to steal that teacher.
yeah.
Because that's really what it's become. It's become people kind of cannibalizing and stealing one teacher to go to a different school to where maybe doesn't have to be the case. And so I think that's part of us trying to work together, maybe be able to offer more classes that maybe I couldn't offer as a lone district. But if a larger district that we can partner with offers an elective that maybe we have some kids that could take it, that would be fantastic for us.
It's like a joint venture, kind of a joint venture partnership. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a co-op, kind of an interlocal agreement between schools.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, it's very innovative, right? It's more of a, I don't know if growth mindset's the right word, but it's definitely an outside the box approach. Um, just for our listeners, could you share a little bit of kind of the profile of your district and community, just so they get an idea of the size and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the community is about 800 people in the town of Sentinel. We actually have our district actually encompasses a couple different smaller communities. The community of Rocky is probably about 250 people, and then part of a community of Carter is about another 200 people. So overall, we probably have a district population of 1,000 people, 1,200 people. The school itself is about 290 kids, pre-K through 12. It's a big district. It spans. We go about 13 miles east. We go about 15 miles west. We go about 8 miles north and about 2 miles south of the actual town. So square mileage, it's a pretty big district. But they have about 290 to 300 kids. We have about 44 employees. About 25 of those are teachers, three administrators, a counselor, and then support staff. So pretty small in the grand scheme of things for Oklahoma. We're pretty small even for Oklahoma as far as rural schools go. But it's a great community. It's a very agricultural heavy community. We farm a lot of wheat, cotton, soybeans, things like that. So that's kind of where our roots are.
Do the students typically stay in the community, or they typically leave to go to other areas after they
Uh,
graduate?
After they graduate, they typically leave, which is a good thing. And I would even tell you from the people that own the farmland around the community, like they push their kids to leave and to go, whether that be uh, go someplace else, go live someplace else, go to school someplace else, um, go to college, things like that. So it's a situation where, obviously not 100%. We still have kids that go right out of high school and maybe find a job around here locally and live here. But I would say that we have a majority of our kids, a high number of our kids leave and go and kind of experience what it's like outside of our little bubble. And then it's a great place to live. So we do get people that want to come back.
Got it, got it. And are most of the parents of your students, I guess they own, a piece of land and they farm that land, or are a lot of them actual working on the land itself, or what does that typically look like?
No, not as many. I mean, it's not a huge number of families that own probably the different parts of land. So I would say that's probably limited to maybe of our 290 kids, that's probably limited to maybe 20, 25 kids total as far as the families that own it. So you have people that live here in town, and some people work. We have a local bank. We have a few local businesses. Other people drive maybe to Clinton or Elk City, or Hobart or Cordell, which are ranging anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes away as far as a job commute. So which out here is a pretty easy commute because you're not seeing many other people on the road. But that's kind of the makeup of our parents and our kids.
Got it, got it. No, that's interesting, and I wanted to share that because every district, and probably should do that more on these podcasts, is every district's so unique and so different. Um, whether that be the experience or the background or whatever it may be. Um, so what's the future look like? What's on the horizon for your district that maybe could move the needle a little bit to make things even better?
I mean, we're talking about a few different things. Typically, our district does not do very many bond issues, and so that's not something that's done very often. But we are looking at some possible projects, whether that be an ag ed building, maybe that needs to be updated, or things like that. There's also we have a spaceport in Oklahoma, and it's actually located about 15 minutes north of Sentinel, in Burns Flat. And so that is starting to take off a little bit as far as businesses coming in.
Spaceport? What is it?
Yes, Spaceport, Oklahoma. It's actually located in Burns Flat. It was an old Air Force base. And so the state took it over several years ago. I think it has the longest continuous runway, maybe in the United States. And so it actually gets used for different aviation and aeronautics testing. There's some companies that come in and do drone testing. Right now, there's a company that's just come in that does like painting and kind of refurbishing of large aircraft. And so we're hoping that that investment into that we can maybe offer some things to our kids as far as classes or things like that, that maybe they can then go directly work for companies that are going to inhabit that spaceport. So that's something interesting coming up.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's worth talking about. So that's a way that I guess your local community can be transformed if if somebody decided they were going to open a business right there in community. Could you kind of walk through that process of what that looks like? Let's say somebody had an idea and they were going to come, invest in your community, if you will. What would that look like?
Oh, I don't know. Usually any kind of investment, or as far as businesses we go, it's usually restaurants or things like that that are pretty simple. Um, So I don't know exactly what that would look like for us. We have excuse me, we have a downtown area with office spaces. So I think if there was ever someone that wanted to come and be a part of the community and open up a business, I think that would be doable. I do think with the spaceport and the aviation sector, we have a lot of wide open spaces out here. So as far as aviation, aeronautics, drones, things like that, I think that's something that um, our kids would be interested in and something that we could kind of build curriculum towards as far as maybe being able to offer classes to maybe be able to fill job opportunities someday with that.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So if let's say a factory or some other technology company, aeronautics company were to open that, then you guys could actually shape the curriculum. And I imagine more businesses would be established around that because now the economy's doing even better, right?
Yeah, I mean that would be my hope for us, Burns Flat, Dill City Public Schools, Cordell, Canute, Elk City. I mean, there's a lot of schools around here that if we were all kind of on the same page, I mean, we could be supplying employees for um, businesses that were either coming in or wanted to come in, I would think.
And it got me thinking about this just because you did mention it's a rural area. Have you seen an area be transformed like that, like a local community that let's say a business opened up in a neighboring community and it kind of completely changed the demographics and makeup of the community in general, or
I haven't seen it out here. Um, I would say one of the places that I know of in Oklahoma, or a couple different places, Pawhuska, Oklahoma, which is kind of up in the Stillwater area. I don't know if you watch a whole lot of HGTV or not, but the Pioneer Woman, it's a big brand. They're from that area and they opened up and did a lot of investment in that area. And it's really helped, I think, Pawhuska Public Schools. In Pryor, Oklahoma, Google opened up a data center, and the money off of that has helped Pryor Public Schools. So, yeah, I mean, there's a few different instances to where things like those things have happened to where the tax base has grown. And jobs have been available that weren't available before, and I think the surrounding areas have kind of done their best to help meet those demands.
very nice. Wow. Okay. Well, no, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I just have one more question before we close out. If you were to have another leader in public education, such as yourself, come on the podcast and share their story and kind of what their focus is and what they're doing in their district, who would you recommend?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's a bunch of people. I mean, I just came from a superintendent's meeting, a local superintendent's meeting where we had probably 15 or 20 local people that I think really do a good job. Um, for something like this, a podcast like this, I think a couple guys come to mind that I know. I don't know really well, but I've sat on um, committees with them and been a part of meetings that they've been in. I think Rob Miller from Bixby Public Schools. It's a suburb of Tulsa. I think he's very thoughtful and very smart, and does a really good job with Bixby. And I think Dr. Nick Millerino at Norman Public Schools is very innovative and very thoughtful. Also, they started an Oklahoma Aviation Academy a couple years ago and kind of partner with the University of Oklahoma. And I think to me, that's kind of one of those things that other schools in the state can look at and kind of try to model. Maybe not as a big of a scale as what Norman Public Schools can do. It's a big town, big school system, but it does give you something to kind of look at and kind of maybe shoot towards. But I think those guys are really good at what they do and kind of people that I kind of keep tabs on, even though their districts are much different than mine. Those are both 5A, 6A districts with, thousands of kids. But I think that kind of the way they approach their jobs and kind of how thoughtful they are about what they do, are always kind of guys that I kind of keep tabs on and try to see what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that because I mean, it's like anything, you find that great leaders are surrounded by other great leaders, right? It's the the- interesting how that works, right? They say,
Yeah.
I guess they say you're the average of the five people you spend the time with most, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, super excited that you're able to join us today and your time, give us your time. I know you're super busy as a superintendent, right? So, um, anything else before we close out?
No, no, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate anybody who is takes up the mantle of promoting and publicizing public ed and what people are doing because it's an everyday deal to where if you came to my school, I could find 45 people every day that if they just told their story, it would be pretty incredible. And so there are thousands of people out there like that. And so for someone like you to give me and people like me a chance to kind of brag on what's going on with our schools and with our people is great as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And there is so many good things going on, great things that are happening, and just sharing that, right? And most people don't ask the questions, but
Yeah.
that's what we're here for. We're spreading the good word around public education. So before we close out, we do want to give one final shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's giving away hundreds of millions of dollars away to public education. So if your district needs unrestricted funds, reach out to Ideal Impact. And for those that have been tuning in, stay tuned for future episodes of the Educational Leadership Podcast.